The day a Mafia boss discovered that some things are more dangerous than bullets, like watching the woman you love smile at someone else. The mansion was silent except for the soft click of Ava's shoes against marble as she carried fresh linens down the east corridor. It was the kind of silence that Lucas Graves had built his empire on, controlled, absolute, suffocating. She had learned to move through it like water, invisible and essential all at once. Then the doorbell rang. Not the sharp buzz of delivery or the double chime of security. This was different. 3 deliberate presses, confident and casual, the kind of ring that said, "I belong here." Ava stopped mid-step, her arms full of pressed white sheets that suddenly felt too heavy. Her heart kicked against her ribs in a way that made her angry at herself. It was just the door. Just someone arriving. Except she knew that rhythm. She had heard it a dozen times over the past year, always followed by laughter in the hallway, always followed by Lucas's rare, almost smile when he descended the stairs to greet his second-in-command. Vincent. She stood frozen in the corridor, listening to the echo fade through the cavernous foyer. The guards wouldn't answer. They never did during Lucas's private hours. The evening staff had already retreated to the West Wing. It would fall to her. It always fell to her. Ava set the linens on a side table and smoothed her hands down the front of her simple cream dress, the one she wore when she wasn't in uniform. She had changed an hour ago, thinking she had time, thinking she could prepare herself for this moment. Now her palms were damp and her throat was tight, and she hated that a doorbell could do this to her. From the landing above, Lucas Graves stood perfectly still. He had been reviewing security reports at his desk when he heard it. That specific pattern. Vincent's pattern. He had risen from his chair, intending to go down and meet him, to discuss the shipment delay they had been managing all week. But then he saw Ava emerge from the East Wing, and something in her posture made him stop. She was nervous. Ava was never nervous. Not when delivering bad news about household expenses. Not when armed men showed up at 3 a.m. Not even when she had walked in on a meeting that had ended with blood on his office floor. She had simply stepped over the stain, set down his coffee, and left without a word. But now, walking toward his front door to answer it for Vincent Kane, she was nervous. Lucas's hand tightened on the railing. Ava reached the door and paused, her hand hovering over the handle. She could see Vincent's silhouette through the frosted glass, tall, relaxed, waiting. She pressed her eyes shut for just a second, whispered something to herself that might have been "it's just lunch," and pulled the door open. Vincent stood on the stone steps in a charcoal suit jacket over a black shirt, no tie, looking like he had just stepped out of a magazine about men who were dangerous, but didn't need to prove it. His dark hair was styled, but not overly so, and when he saw her, his entire face softened into something warm and genuine. "Ava," he said, and the way he said her name, not Miss Davis, not ma'am, just Ava, made her stomach flip. "Vincent," she managed, her voice coming out quieter than she intended. You're actually here." "Well, yeah." He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes and made dimples appear. "I said I'd pick you up at 6. It's 6. He glanced past her into the mansion, then back to her face. "Unless you changed your mind? Because that's okay too. No pressure."
No.
"No, I didn't change my mind." She stepped out onto the threshold, pulling the door halfway closed behind her as if creating a barrier between this moment and the world inside. I wasn't sure you'd really come to the house." "Why wouldn't I?" His brow furrowed, concerned now. "Ava, this is just lunch. I'm not trying to." "I know." She cut him off gently, offering a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I know what this is." What she didn't say, "I know this is kindness. I know you feel sorry for me. I know you've noticed that I never leave this place, that I have no friends, no life outside these walls." What she didn't say, "I wish I could want this to be more." From the shadows of the second-floor landing, Lucas Graves watched Vincent's hand move to the small of Ava's back as he guided her toward his car. Not possessive, not inappropriate, just the kind of casual touch people offered when they were comfortable with each other. Something cracked inside Lucas's chest. He had not moved, had not made a sound. but his knuckles had gone white where they gripped the iron railing, and his jaw was clenched so tight he could taste blood from where he had bitten the inside of his cheek. Vincent opened the passenger door. Ava hesitated, glanced back at the mansion, at the massive, silent structure that had been her entire world for 3 years, and then slid into the seat. The door closed. Vincent walked around to the driver's side. The engine started, a low purr that Lucas could hear even from where he stood. And then they were gone. The mansion settled back into its silence, but it felt different now. Emptier. Lucas stood on the landing long after the taillights had disappeared beyond the gates, staring at the place where Ava had stood in his doorway, dressed for someone else, smiling for someone else. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Business. Always business. He ignored it. For the first time in 15 years of running an empire built on precision and control, Lucas Graves could not focus on a single goddamn thing except the image of Ava's nervous smile as she left his house on another man's arm. And the terrifying realization that he had no right to feel this way. No right to the rage burning through his veins. No right to the jealousy that was already making him reach for his phone to call his head of security. Because she was his maid. And he had spent 3 years making absolutely certain she believed that was all she would ever be. 3 years ago, Ava had arrived at the Graves mansion with a single suitcase and eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. Lucas had interviewed her himself, which was unusual. He never handled domestic staff. But his previous housekeeper had recommended her niece with such insistence that he had agreed to a 5-minute conversation. It had lasted 47 minutes. He remembered because he had checked his watch twice, irritated at himself for continuing to ask questions. Where had she worked before? A hotel downtown. Why did she leave? The manager had a problem keeping his hands to himself. Did she have family? A sister in Boston she hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Why did she want this job? She needed somewhere quiet. Somewhere she could disappear. That last answer had done something to him. He understood disappearing. He had built an empire on it, moving through the world like a shadow, letting his reputation precede him so he never had to fully materialize. And here was this young woman with sad eyes and careful posture, asking for the same thing he had been chasing his whole life. Safety and invisibility. He had hired her on the spot with 3 conditions. She would live in the East Wing. She would manage the household but never enter his private office without permission. And she would never, under any circumstances, ask questions about his business. She had nodded once, firm and solemn, and said, "I'm very good at not seeing things." That should have been the end of it. A simple employment arrangement. She kept his home running like clockwork, meals prepared before he knew he was hungry, clothes laundered and pressed, fresh flowers in the foyer every Monday. The mansion had never felt more organized, more breathable, more like something other than a fortress. But then came the nights when he worked late and found coffee outside his door at 2 a.m, still hot, with a small plate of food he would have skipped otherwise. She never knocked, never interrupted, just left it there like an offering and disappeared. Or the morning after a particularly brutal confrontation that had left him with bruised knuckles and blood on his shirt, when he had stumbled into the kitchen at dawn to find her already awake. She had taken one look at his hand, set down a first aid kit without a word, and walked away. No questions. No fear in her eyes. Just quiet understanding. That was when Lucas realized he had made a mistake. Not in hiring her. In thinking he could keep her at a distance. Because Ava saw him. Not the boss, not the killer, not the man whose name made grown men flinch. She saw the person underneath who forgot to eat, who worked himself to exhaustion, who carried the weight of an empire on shoulders that were tired of holding it all. So Lucas had built new rules. Unspoken ones that he enforced with rigid discipline. He never ate meals with her present. Never made small talk. Never lingered in rooms she was cleaning. He paid her double what the position warranted and told himself it was generosity, not guilt. He gave her Sundays off and made sure his security knew to let her come and go freely, and told himself it was professional courtesy, not care. He never touched her. Not a handshake, not a brush of fingers when she handed him documents, not even accidental contact in doorways. He would rather walk an extra corridor than risk it. And Ava, for her part, had honored the distance. She lived in his home like a benevolent ghost, essential but intangible. She never asked for more, never pushed against the invisible walls he had constructed between them. For 3 years, they had existed in this careful balance. Close enough to matter, far enough to survive it. Until Vincent Kane rang the doorbell and reminded Lucas that Ava was not a ghost at all. She was a woman, and she was allowed to leave. Lucas stood at the window of his office, one hand braced against the frame, watching Vincent's black Mercedes pull up to the front steps. The engine idled smooth and expensive, the kind of car that announced success without shouting it. Vincent stepped out, adjusting his jacket with the easy confidence of a man who had never questioned his right to exist in the world. Lucas's jaw tightened. He told himself he was still standing there because he needed to finish reviewing the manifest on his desk. Told himself the view just happened to include the front drive. Told himself he wasn't actually watching for her. Then Ava appeared. She stepped out onto the stone portico in a cream dress that caught the late afternoon light like something out of a dream. It wasn't the black uniform she wore during work hours or the simple cotton dress she changed into for evenings. This was different. Fitted at the waist, flowing at the hem, with delicate straps that left her shoulders bare. She had left her hair down, soft waves falling past her shoulders instead of the neat bun she always wore. Lucas forgot how to breathe. He had seen Ava every day for 3 years, had memorized the particular way she moved through his home, efficient and quiet. Had noticed, in the detached way one notices pleasant things, that she was lovely in an understated way. But this version of her, dressed for someone else, nervous and hopeful and beautiful, this he had never seen. Vincent opened the passenger door with a gallant gesture that made Ava laugh. Actually laugh. The sound didn't carry up to the second floor, but Lucas saw the way her shoulders relaxed, the way she tucked hair behind her ear and that unconscious gesture she made when she was genuinely pleased. Something violent twisted in his chest. His phone buzzed against the desk behind him. Once. Twice. 3 times in rapid succession. He didn't turn. Couldn't turn. His entire field of vision had narrowed to the woman in the cream dress and the man who was making her smile. Vincent said something. Ava responded, her hand moving to her collarbone in surprise. Vincent grinned, pleased with whatever reaction he had gotten. Then he touched her, just a light hand at the small of her back, guiding her toward the open car door, and Lucas's knuckles went white where they gripped the window frame. The phone rang again, louder this time, the ringtone cutting through the silence of the office like an alarm. Business. It was always business. Shipments. Territories. Money moving through channels that required his personal attention. The kind of call he never ignored. He let it ring. Ava hesitated at the car door, turning back to look at the mansion. Her gaze swept up toward the second floor, toward his office window, and for one suspended moment Lucas thought she saw him. Thought she was looking for him, seeking permission or reassurance or some sign that this mattered. But her eyes didn't stop. Didn't focus. She was just looking at the house, at the prison she lived in, before stepping into freedom. Then she slid into the passenger seat, the cream dress pooling around her legs, and Vincent closed the door with a soft, final click. The phone stopped ringing. Started again immediately. Lucas watched Vincent walk around the front of the car, unhurried and relaxed, the picture of a man who had nothing to fear. Watched him settle into the driver's seat. Watched the Mercedes begin its slow roll down the long driveway toward the iron gates that were already opening. Watched Ava leave. His phone buzzed with a text. Then another. Somewhere in the mansion, he heard footsteps. One of his men, probably, coming to find him for something urgent. Lucas didn't move. He stood at that window until the car disappeared beyond the gates, until the dust settled on the empty driveway, until there was nothing left to see but the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grounds of a mansion that suddenly felt too big and too quiet and unbearably empty. Only then did he reach for his phone. The cafe was tucked into a quiet corner of the city, the kind of place with iron tables on a brick patio and ivy climbing whitewashed walls. String lights hung overhead even though it was still daylight, and the air smelled like fresh bread and coffee, and something floral Ava couldn't quite name. It was charming in a way that felt almost fictional, like stepping into a movie about other people's lives. Vincent had chosen well. They sat at a corner table beneath a sprawling olive tree, far enough from other diners that their conversation felt private. Ava had ordered a salad she barely touched, too nervous to eat, but Vincent seemed content to talk and make her laugh with stories about mishaps in the organization, carefully edited versions that left out the violence, but kept the absurdity. "So there I am," Vincent said, grinning, trying to explain to this guy why we can't just use drones to move product, and he looks at me dead serious and says, "What if we put tiny parachutes on them?" He shook his head. "Tiny parachutes. Like we're running a delivery service for action figures." Ava laughed, a real one this time, and felt something in her chest unwind slightly. This was nice. Normal. The kind of afternoon regular people had all the time without thinking twice about it. "What about you?" Vincent asked, his tone shifting to something gentler. "Before the mansion, what did you do?" The question landed heavier than he probably intended. Ava looked down at her untouched salad, pushing a cherry tomato around with her fork. "I worked at a hotel. Nothing glamorous. Housekeeping mostly. Some front desk when they were short-staffed." "Did you like it?" "I liked disappearing into the work." She paused, considering. "I liked that I could make a room perfect and then leave before anyone knew I'd been there." Vincent studied her for a moment, something sad flickering across his face. "That's a lonely way to live." "Safe, though." "Safe from what?" Ava didn't answer. Vincent didn't push. He just nodded slowly, understanding in the way people who had also run from things understood. "What did you want to be?" he asked instead. "Before life got complicated. When you were young and stupid and thought anything was possible." The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. She looked up at the string lights, at the ivy, at anything but Vincent's kind, patient face. "A teacher," she said quietly. "Elementary school. I wanted to be the kind of teacher kids remembered. The one who made them feel seen." "You still could."
"No."
She smiled, but it was fragile. "That version of me is gone." Vincent reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. Not touching, just close. An offering.
"Ava."
"Is there someone you care about?" The question hung in the air between them, like something breakable. Ava's throat tightened. She wanted to lie. Wanted to say no, wanted to laugh it off, wanted to pretend she was the kind of woman who could sit at a cafe with a good man and feel something other than guilt. But the silence stretched too long, and Vincent's expression shifted from curious to knowing. "He doesn't see you, does he?" Vincent said softly, and there was no judgment in it. Just recognition. Ava's eyes filled before she could stop them. One tear escaped, tracking down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly, angry at herself. "He sees me," she whispered, her voice breaking on the words. "He just won't let himself." Vincent sat back slowly, understanding settling over his features like a weight. He didn't ask who.
Didn't need to.
There was only one man in Ava's life. Only one person she existed around. Only one reason she would look that broken over being seen, but not claimed. "How long?" he asked. 3 years. She laughed, but it came out choked. 3 years of living in the same house. 3 years of pretending I don't feel it every time he walks into a room. 3 years of being close enough to matter, but not close enough to. She stopped, pressing her fingers to her mouth. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was choosing his words carefully. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and serious.
"Ava."
"He's going to destroy you, if you let him." "I know. So why stay?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw the concern there. The genuine care. Vincent was a good man trapped in a bad world, and he was offering her a lifeline she couldn't take. "Because," she said simply, "some people are worth being destroyed for." The first sign was the silence. Conversations didn't stop all at once in the cafe, but they stuttered, dropped in volume, shifted in tone. Ava noticed it before she understood why. The way the woman at the next table leaned toward her companion and whispered something urgent. The way the waiter near the entrance straightened his posture and took an unconscious step back. Then she felt it. That particular charge in the air that only one person brought with him. Vincent saw him first. His expression transformed in an instant, the easy warmth draining from his face, replaced by something that looked like dread mixed with resignation. He set down his coffee cup with the careful precision of someone trying not to make sudden movements. "Ava," he said quietly, not looking at her. "Don't turn around." But it was too late. She had already started to turn, already knew who she would see, already felt her heart slam against her ribs with enough force to hurt. Lucas Graves stood just inside the entrance of the cafe, and every single person in that space knew exactly who he was. He wore all black, tailored shirt, perfectly fitted slacks, leather shoes that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His dark hair was immaculate as always, and his eyes, those intense eyes that could shift from cold calculation to devastating focus in a heartbeat, were locked directly on their table. On Vincent. On her. Ava's entire body went rigid. Her breath caught somewhere in her chest and refused to move. She watched Lucas scan the patio with the unhurried assessment of a man who owned every space he entered, who had never once in his life worried about being unwelcome. Then he started walking. Not rushed. Not aggressive. Just steady, purposeful steps that ate up the distance between the entrance and their corner table. Conversations died completely now. A fork clattered against a plate somewhere. Someone's chair scraped as they shifted to get a better view of whatever was about to happen. Lucas moved through it all like he didn't notice, like there was only one thing in the world that mattered, and it was the table where his second-in-command sat having lunch with his maid. Ava tried to remember how to breathe. Tried to catalog what she was seeing. Was he angry? He didn't look angry. His face was perfectly calm, almost pleasant, the expression he wore during business negotiations. But she had lived in his house for 3 years. She knew the difference between Lucas calm and Lucas controlled. This was controlled, which meant he was furious. Vincent stood as Lucas approached, a gesture of respect that was automatic, ingrained. "Boss," he said evenly, "I didn't realize you'd be in this part of." Vincent. Lucas's voice cut through the noise of the cafe like a blade, quiet but absolute. He stopped beside their table, his presence somehow making the entire patio feel smaller. His eyes flicked to Ava for just a fraction of a second. She saw something flash there, something that looked almost like pain, then returned to Vincent. A word. Outside. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even really a command. It was simply a statement of what was about to happen, spoken with the certainty of a man who had never been told no in his life. Vincent's jaw tightened. For a moment, Ava thought he might refuse. Might stand his ground and force Lucas to say whatever he needed to say right here, in front of her, in front of everyone. But Vincent had survived in Lucas's organization for years by knowing exactly which battles to fight. "Of course," he said. He looked at Ava, and there was apology written all over his face. "I'll be right back." "No," Lucas said softly, still not looking at her. "You won't." The words hung in the air like a threat, like a promise, like the end of something that had barely begun. Vincent set his napkin on the table with careful deliberation, the gesture somehow both defiant and resigned. He stepped away from his chair, and Lucas moved to let him pass, finally, allowing his gaze to drop to Ava. She stared up at him, her hands twisted together in her lap beneath the table, where he couldn't see them shaking. His expression gave away nothing.
No anger, no jealousy, no emotion whatsoever.
Just that terrible, devastating control. "Wait here," Lucas said to her, and there was something in his voice she had never heard before. Something raw beneath the ice. Then he turned and followed Vincent toward the exit, leaving Ava alone at a table full of half-eaten food and unfinished confessions, with every person in the cafe pretending not to stare at her. The alley behind the cafe was narrow and shadowed, the kind of space where the city's charm ended and its reality began. Dumpsters lined one wall, and the smell of grease and stale water hung in the air. Lucas had walked past the concerned hostess without a word, Vincent following 3 steps behind, both of them moving with the synchronized precision of men who had done this dance before. But this time was different. Lucas stopped halfway down the alley and turned, and the look on his face made Vincent's instincts scream at him to be careful. He had seen Lucas angry before, had watched him break a man's hand for skimming profits, had stood beside him during interrogations that left rooms painted red. But this wasn't that kind of anger. This was personal. "You crossed a line," Lucas said, his voice low and laced with something dangerous. Vincent held his ground, hands loose at his sides, non-threatening but ready. "What line would that be?" "Don't." Lucas took a step forward, and Vincent saw the muscle jump in his jaw. "Don't play stupid with me, Vincent. Not today. Not about this." "About taking Ava to lunch?" Vincent's tone stayed even, reasonable. "Is that what we're doing here? You followed us to a cafe to tell me I can't have lunch with a woman? She's not just a woman." "Then what is she, Lucas?" Vincent's voice sharpened. "Because from where I'm standing, she's a woman who works in your house, who keeps your home running, who makes sure you eat, who exists in your orbit like she's supposed to be grateful for the privilege. And I took her to lunch. That's it. Lunch." Lucas's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You don't understand." "No, I understand perfectly." Vincent cut him off, something snapping in his carefully maintained composure. "I understand that you've had that woman living under your roof for 3 years. 3 years, Lucas. And in all that time, you've never once treated her like anything other than staff. Never acknowledged that she's more than a maid. Never given her a single reason to believe she matters to you as anything other than someone who keeps your schedule organized. I'm not finished." Vincent's voice rose slightly, frustration bleeding through. "So I thought, maybe someone should treat her like she's worth something. Like she's a person with feelings and dreams, and a life that exists beyond cleaning your house and pretending not to see the blood on your shirts. So yes, I took her to lunch. I took her somewhere nice where she could smile and laugh and feel like maybe the world isn't just your mansion and your rules and your control." Lucas moved so fast Vincent barely saw it coming. 1 second he was standing 3 feet away, the next he had Vincent by the front of his jacket, slammed against the brick wall hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. "You don't know what you're talking about," Lucas hissed, his face inches from Vincent's, and for the first time Vincent saw the cracks in the armor, the desperation beneath the rage. Vincent didn't fight back. Didn't even try. He just looked Lucas in the eye and said quietly, "Then tell me what line I crossed. Tell me the rule I broke. Because I don't see one anywhere except in your head." Lucas's grip tightened. "She's mine to protect. She's not your property, Lucas." Vincent's voice was soft but relentless. "She's a woman. A woman who deserves to be treated like one. Who deserves to be seen and valued, and I do see her." The words exploded out of Lucas like they'd been locked behind his teeth for years. He released Vincent abruptly, stepping back, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration so unlike him it was almost shocking. "I see her. Every goddamn day I see her. Do you think I don't know what she is? Do you think I don't?" He stopped, jaw working, unable to finish the sentence. Vincent straightened his jacket, breathing hard, watching Lucas unravel in real time. "Then why," he asked, "if you see her, if she matters, why does she spend every night alone in that house thinking she's invisible to you?" Lucas turned away, his shoulders rigid with tension. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because the moment I acknowledge what she is to me, she becomes a target. And I can't." His hands clenched. "I won't let that happen." Vincent stared at his boss's back, understanding finally clicking into place like a lock turning. "So you'd rather let her believe she means nothing?" "I'd rather she stay alive." The words fell like stones between them, heavy and final. Vincent walked back into the cafe like a man who had just made a decision that would change everything. His jacket was slightly rumpled, his expression carved from something harder than it had been when he left. Lucas followed several paces behind, his face an unreadable mask, but Ava saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands hung at his sides like he didn't quite know what to do with them. Every eye in the cafe tracked their movement. The entertainment wasn't over yet. Vincent approached the table where Ava sat frozen, her untouched salad now wilted and sad-looking in the afternoon light. She looked up at him with wide eyes, searching his face for answers, for reassurance, for any clue about what had just happened in that alley. "We should go," Vincent said quietly, extending his hand to her. Ava glanced past him to where Lucas stood near the entrance, perfectly still, watching them with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Vincent, what? Please." His voice was gentle but firm. "Let me take you home." She took his hand and stood, her legs unsteady beneath her. Vincent left cash on the table. Too much, probably, but neither of them cared, and placed his other hand at the small of her back, guiding her toward the exit. They had to pass Lucas to leave. There was no other way out. Ava kept her eyes down, focusing on the brick pavers beneath her feet, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone in the cafe could hear it. Vincent's hand stayed steady against her back, grounding her, keeping her moving forward. They were almost past him. Almost safe. Almost gone. Then Vincent stopped. Ava felt it before she understood it. The sudden stillness in Vincent's body, the way his hand pressed slightly firmer against her back as if to brace her. She looked up and found Vincent staring directly at Lucas, something resolute hardening in his expression. "Don't," Lucas said, his voice barely audible. It might have been a warning. It might have been a plea. Vincent ignored him. He turned slightly, angling his body so that Ava was partially shielded, protected even now. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear and loud enough that several nearby tables would hear every word. "She's in love with you." Ava's entire world tilted sideways. Her breath stopped. Her vision tunneled. She felt Vincent's hand tighten against her back, the only thing keeping her upright. "Has been since the day she walked into your house," Vincent continued, relentless now, each word landing like a physical blow. 3 years, Lucas. 3 years of watching you, taking care of you, existing in your orbit and hoping, praying, that maybe one day you'd look at her like she was more than furniture. Vincent. Lucas's voice was raw, stripped of all its usual control. "Stop. And you're destroying her." Vincent's tone shifted, turning harder, more accusatory. "You're destroying her by pretending not to know. By treating her like she's replaceable when you and I both know there's not another person on this earth who looks at you the way she does. Who sees past the monster to the man underneath. Who would stand beside you through anything if you'd just let her." Ava couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't do anything but stand there while Vincent exposed every secret she had buried in her chest for 3 years, laid them all out in the middle of a cafe for Lucas and everyone else to witness. Lucas's face had gone pale, his dark eyes locked on Ava now with an expression she had never seen before, shock and anguish, and something that looked terrifyingly close to hope. "She deserves better than this," Vincent said, his voice dropping lower, meant only for Lucas now. "Better than loving someone who's too much of a coward to love her back." He didn't wait for a response. He turned, his hand still steady against Ava's back, and guided her toward the exit. She moved on autopilot, her legs somehow still functioning even though her mind had shut down completely. They passed Lucas, so close Ava could smell his cologne. Cedar and something darker, familiar and devastating. She didn't look at him. Couldn't look at him. If she looked at him now, she would shatter into pieces right there on the brick patio. Vincent kept walking, kept her moving, and Ava let him, because she didn't know what else to do. Behind them, Lucas stood alone in the entrance of the cafe, surrounded by curious strangers and the wreckage of a truth that could no longer be denied. His hands hung useless at his sides, his carefully constructed control crumbling like sand, and for the first time in 15 years of ruling an empire through fear and precision, he had absolutely no idea what to do next. Ava's cream dress disappeared through the doorway, Vincent's protective form beside her, and Lucas remained frozen, unable to follow, unable to leave, unable to do anything but stand there and feel the weight of 3 years of cowardice crushing down on him all at once. Lucas caught up to them in the parking lot. Vincent saw him coming and stepped aside without a word, reading the situation with the instinct of a man who knew when to fight and when to retreat. He squeezed Ava's shoulder once, gentle, reassuring, then walked to his own car, leaving her standing alone beside the passenger door. "Get in," Lucas said, nodding toward his black SUV parked 3 spaces down. His voice was steady, but something underneath it wasn't. Something fractured and barely held together. Ava didn't argue,
Didn't speak.
just walked to his vehicle on legs that felt disconnected from her body and climbed into the passenger seat. The leather was cold against her bare shoulders. Lucas slid behind the wheel and started the engine. The drive back to the mansion was suffocating in its silence. Ava stared out the window, watching the city blur past, her hands twisted together in her lap. Lucas gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, his jaw so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his beard. Neither of them said a word. There were too many words and no words at all. When they pulled through the gates, Lucas didn't stop at the main entrance. He drove around to the private garage, the one only he used, and killed the engine. The sudden silence felt louder than the drive had been. "Come with me," he said quietly. Ava followed him through corridors she had cleaned 100 times, but never walked beside him. Through the main house, up the stairs, down the hall toward the wing she was never supposed to enter without permission. His private quarters. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like finality. Lucas stood in the center of the room with his back to her, one hand pressed against his mouth, his shoulders rising and falling with carefully controlled breaths. Ava waited, her heart thrashing against her ribs, not knowing if she should speak or stay silent or run before whatever was about to happen destroyed them both. "My mother," Lucas said suddenly, his voice rough. He didn't turn around. "She died when I was 12. Shot in our driveway while my father watched from the window." Ava's breath caught. "It was a message," Lucas continued, "from a rival family. They couldn't get to my father directly. He was too protected, too careful. So they went after the thing he loved most. The woman he couldn't hide because he loved her too openly, too publicly, too much." His hand dropped from his mouth, clenched into a fist at his side. "She died because he claimed her. Because everyone knew what she meant to him. Lucas. Everyone I love dies, Ava." He turned finally, and the anguish on his face was so raw it physically hurt to see. "My mother. My brother. Every person I've ever let close. They become targets. Leverage. Weapons used against me. And I swore after my mother that I would never." His voice broke. "I can't let that be you." Ava took a step forward, then another, closing the distance between them even though every instinct screamed that she should protect herself, should guard her heart, should walk away before he broke her completely. "So that's it," she whispered. "You'd rather keep me at arm's length forever? Let me spend the rest of my life invisible to you, because you're afraid." "I'm not afraid of dying, Ava. I'm afraid of watching you die because of me. And I'm dying anyway." The words came out louder than she intended, cracking with emotion. "I'm dying a little more every day living in your house, loving you, watching you pretend I don't exist. At least if something happened to me, at least if the worst came true, I would have had this. I would have had you." Lucas stared at her, his chest heaving. "You don't know what you're asking." "Yes, I do." She closed the final distance between them, so close now she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I'm asking you to be brave enough to let me choose. To let me decide what risks I'm willing to take. Because maybe—" Her voice broke, tears spilling over despite her best efforts to hold them back. "Maybe I'd rather die loved by you than live a lifetime invisible to you." Something in Lucas shattered. She saw it happen, saw the exact moment 3 years of iron control cracked and spilled open. He reached for her with hands that shook, cupping her face like she was something precious and breakable, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I've loved you since the morning you left coffee outside my door," he whispered, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. Since the day you looked at my bloodied hands and didn't flinch. Since every quiet moment you existed in my world and made it bearable. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and consuming and tasted like 3 years of denial finally collapsing under its own impossible weight. Ava's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Lucas's arms wrapped around her waist like he was trying to pull her inside his chest where he could keep her safe forever. They kissed like drowning people finding air, like the world was ending and this was the last moment they'd ever have, like love and fear and longing had finally merged into something neither of them could control. Morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Lucas's bedroom, soft and golden and almost cruel in its beauty. Ava woke slowly, her body warm beneath expensive sheets she had washed 100 times, but never slept in. For a moment, still caught between sleep and consciousness, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered. The cafe. Vincent's confession. Lucas's kiss. The way he had held her through the night like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth. She turned her head and found his side of the bed empty, the sheets cool to the touch. He had been gone for a while. Ava sat up, pulling the sheet around herself, and found him immediately. Lucas stood at the window overlooking the grounds, already dressed in dark slacks and a crisp black shirt, his hair perfectly styled, his posture rigid. He looked exactly like he had every other morning she had seen him, composed, controlled, untouchable. Like last night had never happened. Her heart sank into her stomach. "You're awake," Lucas said without turning around. His voice was carefully neutral, the tone he used during business calls, and something inside Ava cracked at the sound of it. "How long have you been up?" she asked quietly. "A while." He paused, his hand braced against the window frame. "I had some calls to make. Security protocols to review." Security protocols. Of course. Because that was what Lucas did when the world tilted sideways. He built walls and checked locks and made sure everything was controlled again. Ava slid out of bed, found her cream dress crumpled on the floor where it had fallen last night, and pulled it on with shaking hands. The zipper caught halfway up her back, but she didn't ask for help. Didn't want to risk him touching her with that careful distance she could already feel settling between them like fog. She walked to stand beside him at the window, leaving a foot of space between them that felt like miles. "Lucas," she said softly, "what happens now?"
His jaw tightened.
"What do you mean?" "I mean..." She gestured vaguely at the room, at the rumpled bed, at the space between them. "Do I go back to my room? Back to my uniform? Back to being your maid?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "Do we pretend this didn't happen?" Lucas finally turned to look at her, and the pain in his eyes was so profound it took her breath away. "Ava. Because I need to know." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the morning sun. "I need to know if last night meant something, or if it was just a moment. A mistake." "It wasn't a mistake." His hands clenched at his sides. "You could never be a mistake." "Then what am I?" The question came out raw, desperate. "Tell me, Lucas. What am I to you? Because I can't go back to the way things were. I can't serve you coffee and clean your house and pretend my heart isn't breaking every time you look through me like I'm invisible. I can't do it anymore." Lucas's face contorted with something that looked like agony. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. "I don't know how to have you and keep you safe. I don't know how to..." He stopped, his composure finally cracking. "Everyone sees you now, Ava. Vincent knows. Half that cafe saw us. By tonight, word will spread through the organization that Lucas Graves has a weakness. And they'll come for you. They always come. So you'd rather push me away?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You'd rather send me back to being nothing so you don't have to be afraid?" "I'd rather you stay alive." "I'm not alive." The words exploded out of her. "I'm not alive when I'm invisible to you. I'm not alive when I spend every night alone in my room loving someone who won't claim me. That's not living, Lucas. That's just existing. And I'm so tired of just existing." Lucas looked at her like she had just driven a knife between his ribs. His hand reached out, almost touched her face, then dropped. I love you, he said, and it sounded like a confession and an apology and a goodbye all at once. I love you more than I thought I could love anything. But I don't know how to let you be mine without destroying you. Ava stood there in her wrinkled cream dress, tears streaming down her face, staring at the man she loved who couldn't figure out how to love her the way she needed to be loved. She saw it all written on his face, the desire, the fear, the impossible weight of trying to protect her from a world that had taken everyone else he'd ever cared about. And she realized, with a clarity that hurt worse than anything else, that love wasn't going to be enough. Not his love, not hers. Not when he was too broken to accept it. I can't do this, she whispered. Lucas's face went pale. Ava. She turned and walked toward the door, each step feeling like tearing out pieces of her own heart and leaving them scattered across his expensive floor. Her hand closed around the doorknob. Behind her, she heard Lucas take a step forward, heard his breath catch like he was about to call her back. She waited.
Hoping.
Praying. The silence stretched. Ava turned the knob and pulled the door open. She didn't know where she was going. Back to her room to pack, back to the life she'd had before, or just to the hallway to collapse and let the grief consume her. She stepped through the doorway without looking back, and Lucas stood frozen by the window, his hand still half extended toward her, watching the only woman he'd ever loved walk away. Because he was too afraid to hold on.